Oh, I just coughed into my microphone. People keep texting me. Stop texting me. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is MelancholyIguana, or Coley, or Mel, which I'm sure that you already know. And welcome back to Demon of Decay's The Asylum. This would be chapter 15, so I hope that you all enjoy. And I hope that my bloody phone stops going off. Twilight sighed as she reached across the table to grab a fresh sheet of paper, making sure it didn't get marred by any stray paint droplets from Pinky's eager efforts. Around them swam the sounds of ponies working on their own creations, the hum of quiet conversation broken by the odd giggle or wet ping of another tin of paint being knocked over. It was an art class straight out of middle school, complete with safety scissors and non-toxic paint. Picking up the cleanest brush she could find, Twilight dipped the worn bristles into a pot of black paint, letting her mind wander as she began her work.
The shadows. How are they controlling everyone? If I'm such a threat, why do they let me wander around? Shouldn't they have just killed me? Or why not just have me locked away in solitary confinement on a permanent basis? Well, there are limits to its power. So maybe it can't hurt me here directly? That would explain why it had to take me back to Equestria to try and break me emotionally. Does that mean...
Twilight sighed, not finishing the question. She felt a headache coming on.
There are just too many questions and not enough answers. Until I know more, I've got to avoid getting distracted by shadows and phantoms and things that can't affect me. If I can keep my head down and keep acting sane, then it will make my job so much easier.
Now, Twilight, don't you think that's a little grim for arts and crafts? Twilight lifted her head up from her work to find her art teacher, Tularula, standing beside her, a frown etched onto the older mare's face. Pinkie Pie busied herself with her own work as Tularula leaned over Twilight's shoulder. Twilight plucked the brush from her mouth.
What do you mean?
She asked, as she glanced back down at the table. It took her a moment to realize what she had been painting. Her eyes widened in alarm. A pool of black ink marred the pristine white of her paper, forming a vague stallion shape. Shrouded in heavy black fabric, his face was hidden beneath a porcelain mask formed into a long and dangerous-looking beak. The eyes of the mask were empty pits of nothingness, like open windows on a starless night. Tularula's frown deepened as she turned towards Twilight, although her eyes lingered on her painting. Well, the idea for today was to paint something happy you saw whilst outside, she explained carefully. Is that very cheerful to you?
No, not really,
Twilight allowed, gulping.
And did you see it outside? No,
Twilight declared.
No, I definitely did not see that outside, or anywhere. I've never seen it anywhere. I was just painting my idea for a Nightmare Night costume. Well then, it seems to me like you're not really following the directions very well, Twilight. You can finish that drawing later.
Tularula crumpled the painting up and slipped it into one of her pockets before plucking a fresh sheet of paper from the stack at the center of the table.
For now, you need to do your best and paint something you saw outside. Something happy and cheerful.
She placed the blank piece of paper in front of Twilight.
Understand?
Twilight nodded obediently.
I sure do, Miss Rula,
she chirped, pasting an insipid grin on her face. The older mare smiled, rubbing Twilight's mane.
That's a good girl.
Twilight managed to wait until Tularula was turned away before scowling. She centered the paper on her table before organizing her paints and brushes again, making sure the paint tins were in alphabetical order, and then double-checking them, in case Pinky had decided it would be funny to switch to green and red again. A not-so-subtle cough in Twilight's ear made her jump, with only a last-minute scramble keeping a paint can from flying out of her hooves. Dropping it back onto the table, Twilight glared at her friend. Pinky smiled back at her.
So, what you gonna paint then? Another creepy bird stallion?
Twilight frowned, shifting in her seat.
No, that was just something I made up. Just forget about it, alright?
She examined the untouched paper.
Honestly, I don't know. Something happy and cheerful, I guess.
Twilight turned to glance outside. The grassy fields bathed in afternoon sunlight. A flash of red launching itself into the air from a nearby tree.
Maybe a robin? Birds are pretty cheerful. Anyway, what did you paint? I painted my bestest buddies.
Pinky declared proudly, as she picked up a paper delicately in her teeth, holding it so Twilight couldn't see it. With a grin and a flourish, she spun around, revealing her painting with a showmare's flair.
Ta-da!
Twilight stared at the paper, her smile disappearing.
See? It's you, me, and Dr. AJ,
Pinky said, through her teeth, her grin eroding away beneath Twilight's slack-jawed expression.
Twilight, do you like it? Is, something wrong? Pinky, when did you learn cubism?
Pinky blinked.
What's cubism?
And that is how to ruin a moment. Moving on! Twilight tossed her head back in irritation as she trotted alongside Pinky.
Look, you don't understand. It was an hour spent sitting around with a bunch of other unicorns who also had their magic dampened, being made to talk about the problems we faced without magic, and how we overcame that. How can that be labeled therapy? Well, Dr. Roy says that the groups are for us to talk about our problems so that we feel better afterwards, Pinky offered, as they moved down the hallway, part of a loose line of patients trailing out of the cafeteria. But the only problem is that the hospital is forcing us to wear these things in the first place,
Twilight cried, smacking the limiter wrapping around her horn for emphasis.
That's like a group of thieves forcing their victims together and discussing the hardships of being robbed. If you don't want ponies to be bothered by what you do, then stop doing it. Well, at least it's all over now, right?
Pinky pointed out with a grin. Twilight gave a reluctant nod, biting down on her frustrations as she marched on silently. The orderlies led them to a large rectangular room with the same mesh-covered windows she was so familiar with. There were 2 rows of pillars running down the middle of the room, supporting a high ceiling painted in a blue and white facsimile of a clear summer day. Although no larger than a cafeteria, it felt less confining. The regiment's lines of tables had been replaced with a more organic, if slightly anarchic, assortment of couches and chairs and playing mats, each group of furniture arranged in their own little clusters. It had all the trappings of a daycare centre, Twilight mused, a thought that did little to improve her mood. The patients around her made beelines towards their favourite locations, competing for the softest chairs and warmest blankets. The orderlies and nurses kept a trained eye on the most exuberant of the patients, prepared to step in and prevent any conflicts from developing. Many of the toys were dented or scratched, while the boxes for the board games were held together with naught but tape. There were scars gained in the line of service, the marks of a hard life spent in servitude to the harshest of masters. The foal. Despite the kindergarten atmosphere, Twilight was pleased to note that it didn't cater for the younger patients alone. The far side of the room was dominated by low bookshelves, their contents as battered as the rest of the entertainment available. Even from a distance, she could tell that they were not simple pop-up books or children's stories, but had more substantial fare on offer as well. Her eyes lingered on the shelves as she turned away from them. About the only thing in the room not scratched and worn was the radio, tucked up against one of the pillars. The fact that one of the orderlies never strayed more than a few yards from it explained just how it had escaped so unscathed. Despite his stern gaze, Twilight found herself gravitating towards it, drawn in by the sound of jazz. The smooth melody was intoxicating after a day spent around mental patients, and the habit of screaming without warning. Twilight halted a safe distance away from the guard and his precious machine, letting the mellow sounds wash over her. She felt like she were in a bubble of maturity, the closest table bearing an obviously underused chessboard, while the music masked the sound of foals at play. Even the orderly's suspicious gaze couldn't keep her from savouring the moment of relative tranquility.
Twilight?
Twilight stopped tapping her hoof and opened her eyes to find Pinkie Pie looking at her.
Sorry, Pinkie. I guess I zoned out there for a moment. What's up? Well, I was wondering if you wanted to actually do something,
she said, shifting her weight from hoof to hoof as she glanced around the room anxiously.
I mean, if we don't go and grab one of the good games soon, then we'll be stuck with one of the ones with all the pieces missing. And I don't really want to play...
Pinkie froze mid-step.
Oh my gosh!
She gasped, jumping in front of her friend. She leaned forwards, pressing her face as close to Twilight's own.
Since you've forgotten how to play all the games we've played, everything is going to be like totally new for you. That's awesome!
Twilight pulled her head back, but Pinkie just leaned forwards to compensate.
That's great.
I know, Pinkie squealed.
Oh, it'll be like being able to play the same game for the first time, but twice. I get it,
Twilight said, gently pushing Pinkie back a few inches to give herself a bit more space. Just the thought of playing board games while Equestria was consumed filled her with a sense of preemptive guilt that she struggled against.
So, what game do you suggest?
Zap Apple Zingers! Pinkie declared, as she led Twilight away from the radio, guiding her towards a set of shelves carrying an assortment of oft-repaired boxes.
Isn't that the game to help foals learn arithmetic?
Yup! Twilight groaned.
Couldn't we try chess instead?
Twilight glanced back over at the radio.
I mean, wouldn't that...
Her words evaporated as she stared at the far side of the room. Just over the orderly's shoulder, she could see a yellow Pegasus seated with her back to everyone else. Her face turned to gaze outside at the setting sun. Even though her features were hidden behind her pink mane, Twilight knew who it was. It was Fluttershy.
Why wouldn't what?
Her eyes locked on her friend. Twilight only muttered something in response when Pinkie repeated the question. Pinkie walked forwards a few paces, to halt beside the nearby table, blocking Fluttershy from view.
So this is the game you are interested in?
Twilight finally turned her attention to Pinkie, but her friend was instead peering at the chessboard resting atop the table.
What? Well, I knew that you kind of liked chess and stuff, but I didn't know that you were that interested in it. I mean, you really seemed out of it there.
Grinning, Pinkie moved to the opposite side of the board from Twilight.
But that's okay, 'cause I like chess too. So, what color do you want to be? Oh, I was really enthralled at the opportunity to play chess, and I just couldn't help myself,
Twilight said.
But, before we play, do you know anything about that mare over there?
Pinkie followed Twilight's outstretched hoof, squinting a bit.
You mean Fluttershy?
Twilight's heart skipped a beat.
Yes, Fluttershy. Do you know much about her?
Leaning back in her seat, Pinkie tapped her chin.
Well, she really likes birds. I think that's why they always called her the bird girl. But they let her keep a bunch of them up in her room, and she's really, really shy. But I don't know why she's at Broadhoof.
Her expression darkened.
Although, I heard that she tried to, kill herself.
Even knowing they were coming, the words were still ice along Twilight's spine.
So you don't know anything about what's wrong with her?
Twilight asked. Pinkie shook her head.
Well, before I lost my memories, were the two of us friends at least? Oh, no. Fluttershy doesn't have any friends. She doesn't like to be around other ponies. I tried to talk with her lots of times, but because if there's any pony that needs a friend, it's her. But she just kind of gets all scared and stuff.
Pinky frowned.
Well, actually, I guess she might kinda sorta be maybe friends with that other Pegasus. Rainbow. Rainbow Dash. Really? They're friends?
She asked in a hopeful tone. If they were friends, it would make her job that much easier. Pinky shrugged, averting her gaze.
I guess. I mean, Rainbow can be nice sometimes, but she can also be kinda mean too. Plus, she is super duper protective of Fluttershy. Like this one time, this Colt threw a ball that hit Fluttershy, and Rainbow bucked him right in the chest. It left a bruise and everything. They must like each other if they spend a lot of time together, though. Sure. I think Rainbow Dash is probably Fluttershy's only friend, besides all of her birds.
Pinky fiddled with one of the pieces.
Actually, I think Fluttershy might be Rainbow's only friend, too. She's always getting angry and in all this kind of trouble and stuff. So, she doesn't seem to have a lot of time for friends.
Twilight sighed. Rebuilding her friendships with the other elements was sounding more difficult by the minute.
So what happened yesterday was a pretty normal day for her? Not normal, but not really surprising either.
Pinky explained.
I mean, Rainbow Dash has gotten into a lot of fights before, but this is the first time she's attacked a doctor. I don't even know how long she's going to be gone away now for that.
Twilight nodded, as she adjusted the pieces on her side of the board so that they were centered in their own squares.
Okay, revised plan, focusing on strengthening ties with Applejack and Pinkie Pie and on starting up a relationship with this Fluttershy. Since Rainbow Dash is being punished for attacking Applejack, I need to use Fluttershy as a means of reaching Rainbow Dash and breaking the ice. Hopefully I can use their feelings for one another to help me succeed. Hey, is it alright if we don't talk about them for a bit?
Pinky asked, dragging Twilight's focus away from her mental checklist.
I feel kind of bad for Fluttershy. I don't really want to talk about her behind her back or anything. Lots of ponies already spread these mean rumors about her. Plus, I feel guilty about the last few times I tried to make friends with her. She got so scared when I tried to talk to her, I thought she was going to have a heart attack or something.
She gestured at the pieces on the board.
Instead of talking about her, maybe we could just play this game instead?
Twilight glanced between Pinky and the distant Fluttershy.
How about you set up the game for us?
She said, as she stood up from the table.
While I go talk to Fluttershy and say hello. Twilight, you shouldn't. She's like really, really shy. You're gonna get her upset. Don't worry, I'm not going to bother her,
said Twilight, as she made her way from the table.
I just want to introduce myself. I'll be right back.
Pinky harumphed.
Fine, but you better not tease her or anything. Cross my heart, Pinky,
Twilight said, with a reassuring grin.
Trust me, I'm just gonna be a minute.
As she turned away from Pinky, her smile vanished. Twilight took a circular route to reach Fluttershy, examining her from a safe distance. With the exception of the worn vest, Fluttershy slotted straight into Twilight's memories. Even her seat by the windows, far away from the rest of the activity, wasn't too far of a stretch. Fluttershy had always been uncomfortable in crowds and more interested in nature.
I just need to approach her calmly and slowly, just to keep her from getting startled. Tag, you're it.
2 colts ran past Twilight, a filly with a serious expression in hot pursuit. The colts weaved in and around the tables and shelves, turning back to taunt the filly chasing them, and ignoring the warnings of the nurses hurrying after them. Hooting and hollering, they slowed down right before taking off again once she closed the gap. So focused were they on teasing her that the younger of the pair wasn't watching where he was going. He clipped his head on the corner of one of the shelves, collapsing to the ground a few yards from Fluttershy with a startled yelp. He stared back the shelf through wide eyes as if processing what had just happened. Then his face scrunched up, and he began to wail. Twilight glanced over at Fluttershy, waiting for her to respond to the foal's cries of pain. Fluttershy didn't even turn to look at him. Her eyes locked firmly on a tree haloed by the setting sun. She held herself like a coiled spring, compressed in tightly like she might dart away at any moment, yet remained perfectly still. The only move she made was a flinch when the nurse whose warnings the cult had ignored rushed past her. Only after the nurse had helped the child to his hooves and escorted him away, admonishing all three foals the entire way, did Fluttershy finally exhale and visibly relax, the coil uncoiling within her. Like a sleuth in a novel, she turned her head just far enough to watch them from the corner of her eyes as they strode past Twilight. Her eyes flickered to Twilight, and their eyes met. Twilight gave her kindest smile, but Fluttershy's eyes only widened in alarm. With a squeak, she spun back to the window and resumed staring out into the fading light, her body once again tense and agitated. Twilight's face fell.
Okay, so Pinky wasn't joking about the shyness. That could complicate things.
Steeling herself, Twilight made her way over to the window, making sure that she made enough noise to avoid sneaking up on Fluttershy. She seemed to shrink away as Twilight drew closer, pulling in on herself as if she was trying to disappear. Halting a yard away from her friend, Twilight opened and closed her mouth a few times before finding her voice.
Hello, Fluttershy,
she said with as much cheer as she could manage, pointedly ignoring the bandages wrapped around Fluttershy's forelegs. Fluttershy said nothing.
I know you might not know me, but my name is Twilight Sparkle.
Again, she said nothing, simply staring straight ahead.
I was told you like birds. I like birds too. What are your favorite birds?
Fluttershy made no sign that she had heard what Twilight was saying, her gaze rigidly fixed on a point outside the window. A bead of sweat on her foreleg appeared as she breathed in rapidly.
I would like to be your friend, if you want,
continued Twilight. Taking a single step forward, Fluttershy flinched as if struck, her eyes clenched tight. Twilight hastily pulled her hoof back.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. I'll just stay here and not come any closer, okay?
Fluttershy continued to say nothing. The only noise, her increasingly rapid breathing. Desperate to find some way to break the ice, Twilight reached into her pockets and pulled out Smarty Pants.
Hey, Fluttershy, would you like to play with my doll?
Twilight shook the doll lightly as if trying to entice a stubborn foal, but Fluttershy's eyes remained closed.
Her name is Smarty Pants, and she'd love to make a new friend.
The sense of awkwardness was soon replaced with growing worry about Fluttershy's condition. Her body was shaking as if she had just been pulled from an icy lake, whilst her breathing had reached the point that Twilight began to worry about her friend hyperventilating.
Fluttershy, it's okay. I'm a friend,
she pleaded. Fluttershy's shivering grew even more pronounced.
I need to do something before she passes out,
Twilight thought, glancing around desperately as she shoved Smarty Pants back into her pocket. Something crinkled against her hoof. Without a moment's hesitation, Twilight tugged the folded-up sheet of paper free.
I painted this bird for you. It's a robin,
she declared with as much honesty as she could muster, dropping the arts and crafts project onto the ground and kicking it over to Fluttershy.
I know you like birds, and I like birds too, and I'd really like to be your friend so that we can talk about birds and maybe other animals, and I can see that you're busy. Okay, bye.
Turning around, Twilight practically fled from Fluttershy, putting as much distance as she could between them before something terrible happened to her friend. She felt cold inside, the short exposure to Fluttershy's extreme anxiety having fed her own concerns.
How can she be that nervous? How am I supposed to remind her of our friendship if just getting close to her puts her in danger of passing out?
Only after she made her way back to Pinkie Pie did she risk looking back at Fluttershy. To her relief, the shaking had diminished, although she still hadn't moved an inch.
Hey, Twilight,
Pinkie said, as Twilight lowered herself down into the seat opposite her. The chessboard was laid out before them, although it was clear Pinkie had been busy finding replacements for the missing pieces. Both of Twilight's bishops were from a checkers set, and one of her rooks looked like the leg from an action figure.
How did it go? I didn't think it would be that bad.
said Twilight, as she wiped away the sweat from her brow, her heartbeat slowing to a reasonable level.
I didn't know she would be like that. Did she do the whole, you know?
Pinky acted out, shivering with an empty, wide-eyed stare for a few seconds.
Did she do that? Yeah, she did. I just went over to say hello, and then she just panicked.
She glanced over at Fluttershy again.
Is that what she normally does around other ponies? Well, it depends. I mean, with the doctors, she's known them for a while and she still gets really super nervous and jumpy and stuff, but she can tolerate having them around her. But you? You're a stranger. And she isn't so good with new ponies.
Twilight hung her head in defeat and sighed.
I need to make her my friend, but how am I supposed to connect with her if she acts like she's seen a ghost whenever I get close by? Well, friendships don't just happen. You have to really work at them.
Pinky smiled.
I mean, we weren't friends right away. You used to always tell me that you were too busy dealing with stuff for the princesses to just play. But eventually I got you to come and have some fun. And then we became bestest buddies. Stuff for the princesses?
Twilight asked, lifting her head.
What stuff? I don't know. Stuff about learning magic and history and being a good student and all that.
Pinky said with a shrug.
I mean, you always had your head in the book as far back as I can remember. You used to tell me it was because the princesses wanted to make sure that you were studying hard and learning your lessons.
Twilight rubbed her forehead and sighed.
So I used to run around telling every pony stories about how I was the princess's most faithful student? And I bet I also went on about how I was some kind of monster-fighting hero, too. Didn't I?
She barely blinked at Pinky's confirmation. Twilight glanced away.
I figured as much.
Pinky nibbled on her lip.
So, you did do all those things, right?
Twilight glanced back at Pinky, the other mare shifting anxiously from side to side in her seat.
Yeah, I did all of those things. You may not have heard the entire story, though,
Twilight said, picking her words with care.
You see, I did do all of that stuff, but I didn't do it alone. I had a few very good friends with me who were there every time. It was only with their help that I was able to do so much. The power of friendship is a very real thing, although it took me a long time to realize it. Wow!
Pinky exhaled, as she stared at Twilight in awe.
So, where are your friends now?
Twilight gave her a soft smile, masking how much the question stung.
Well, I'm trying to find them again. I need their help. Equestria is in danger, and only with their assistance can I help the princess. So Fluttershy is one of your special friends, right? What?
Gasped Twilight.
How did you... what makes you think that? I told you, Twilight. I'm not stupid. It's kind of obvious considering how you responded when you first saw her. Besides, you've looked over at her like 100 times already. Like any minute you expected her either run away or come over and say hi. Okay, yeah, she's one of my friends,
Twilight admitted.
If she was one of your friends,
Pinky frowned,
then how did you do all those amazing things? She's been here for as long as I can remember. It's complicated,
said Twilight, beckoning Pinky closer with a conspiratorial glance around the room.
What I have to tell you, you can't tell any pony else. Understand?
Pinky nodded, but Twilight met her gaze.
I mean it, Pinky. No doctors, no patients, no pony. Promise? Of course. Cross my heart, hope to fly, stick a cupcake in my eye,
she whispered back, raising a hoof to her face. Twilight put on a show of surreptitiously checking the area around them.
The truth is that all my friends have had their memories replaced with lies. They don't remember our adventures or relationships, and they've been made to think that they all belong in this hospital.
Twilight's gaze fell downwards as she paused briefly.
What's worse is that something important has changed within them. The things that make them special and happy, Whoever is doing this has messed up parts of my friends' minds so that they aren't truly themselves anymore. You see, my friends and I are the only chance Equestria has right now. I need to get them back to how they were so that we can use their friendship to defeat the ponies responsible for all this, whoever they might be.
Twilight paused.
Have I ever told you about the elements of harmony?
Pinky furrowed her brow.
I think so. Aren't those really cool pieces of jewelry you showed me in that old book you have? The big, shiny necklaces.
The scholar in Twilight felt a twinge of irritation at having the most powerful artifacts in Equestria dismissed as mere necklaces. But she pushed that aside and simply nodded.
Yep, those are the ones. You see, we're the bearers of the elements. Ponies who represent the power of friendship. With them, we can protect Equestria from any threat. But the elements of harmony cannot work without true friendship. But I've been working on a plan, Pinky.
Twilight grinned as she gestured at one of the pieces on the board.
You see, the Black Queen represents me, and I'm trapped here in the hospital.
Plucking 5 pieces at random, she set them out in a loose circle around the Queen.
These are my 5 friends. Thankfully, they're all in this hospital with me, which means I still have access to them. If I can just spend some time with them and remind them of their real lives, of what we shared together, then I can restore them to their true selves. However,
she grabbed a few white pawns and placed them in between the pieces.
The nurses and staff also believe the false memories too. They don't want me to help free my friends because they only see us as sick ponies. Even my friends themselves believe their illnesses are real. I have to remind them that this life isn't real. If I can do that, then we can break out of this spell and save Equestria.
Pinky continued to stare at the chessboard after Twilight finished her speech. The silence stretching on uncomfortably long.
Okay,
she said softly, catching Twilight off guard.
What? Okay, this is super duper serious,
Pinky intoned.
If there is any pony out there messing with ponies' heads with their memories, making friends forget one another, then I have to help. There's just no way I could let this go on.
She squeezed Twilight's hoof.
You can count on me to do everything I can to help out.
Twilight returned the squeeze.
Pinky, you're something special. I can't thank you enough. It really means a lot to me that I have you on my side. What sort of friend would I be if I weren't there when you needed me most?
She smiled.
Plus, making friends is sort of my thing, you know? That's why you're not going to have to rely on some old dusty fuddy-duddy book telling you how to talk to ponies. I'm your walking, talking reference guide to friendship.
She glanced over at Fluttershy.
But first, you have to know your prey. Prey? Target, mark, objective, whatever, it doesn't matter. You've got to know the pony that you want to make friends with. After all, not every pony wants to be friends right away. It takes lots of work and lots of smiles to win some pony over,
Pinky said, with a knowing nod as she turned back to Twilight.
So, why don't we start with your friends? Who are they? Besides Fluttershy, I mean. Okay, she's bought the story about some mysterious pony being responsible. So you don't have to try and explain the shadow thing. But you can't let her know that she's one of the elements yet. She's gonna have trouble buying that she's one of your friends you've been talking about.
Twilight bit down softly on her lower lip.
Actually, I think it's best if I don't tell you them all right away.
A hurt look flashed over Pinky's face.
What? Why? It's for security reasons. The ponies who did this have, agents working in the hospital staff, so the less I tell you, the less information that you might give away if they catch you. It's standard spy stuff, really. Oh, that makes sense, Pinky said, nodding along with Twilight's words. You don't want to jeopardize your mission. Yeah, exactly, she said with relief. Besides, I think it best if we just focus on one friend at a time. That way, they can help me to save my other friends as well. It sounds like a plan. I'll start working on trying to find out as much as I can on Fluttershy. Since I'm a patient assistant, I get loads of freedom and stuff, so I'll see what I can dig up for you. All right. But, Pinky?
She laid a hoof over Pinky's arm.
Please, please, please don't do anything that will get you in trouble. If the doctors find out that you're breaking the rules for me, they'll lock me up and we won't be able to talk anymore. I'd appreciate any help you can give, but please, don't get in trouble on my behalf. Trust me, Twilight. I know how to avoid detection, she said with a confident grin.
It was far from reassuring.
This Saturday, I'll come by your room and we can talk about Fluttershy.
Her voice trailed off at the end as she glanced over towards the windows, her smile fading.
Hey! Where did she go?
Twilight turned to follow Pinky's gaze. Fluttershy was gone. Raising to her hooves, Twilight began scanning the room. A flash of pink and yellow caught her eye.
There she is,
she declared, pointing to the doors they had entered from. Fluttershy's light frame was almost masked by the two nurses either side of her, as the group made their way out into the hall. An orderly took up a blocking position in front of the doors as soon as they were through, his bulk helping to convince the few curious ponies that they had better things to do than try and follow in their wake.
Horse feathers,
Twilight grumbled, kicking an imaginary pebble.
I was so hoping that I could try and talk to her one more time tonight. Just to, I don't know, pass her a message or something.
She turned to Pinky.
Maybe she'd find it much easier to communicate indirectly? Like pen pals,
Pinky offered.
Exactly.
Twilight trotted over to the window Fluttershy had rested at.
Does she normally sit at this spot? Or does she move around to other windows? Oh, she's always here, Pinky said. I think it's because it's far back from most of the other patients. And it gives her a really good view of that tree out there. That's good. That's very good. That means that I could leave her a note here and she'd be liable to find it. I just need some place to hide it,
said Twilight, as she began searching the area.
I don't want other patients picking it up by mistake.
Pinky nodded.
Or a janitor. Yeah, or a
Twilight froze mid-step.
Or one of the nurses, continued Pinky, or a doctor, or orderlies.
Twilight groaned.
What am I thinking? Of course I couldn't hide a note here for that long. Any hiding place good enough to fool the staff is going to fool Fluttershy too. Maybe you can make your letter into a paper dart and toss it to her, Pinky offered. I can't imagine throwing something at her would make her feel any better. She'd probably just scream and fall over. I mean, when I tried to slide my painting over to her, she nearly died.
Pinky cocked her head to the side.
What painting? The one with the bird I did in arts and crafts. I tried to give that to her and she almost broke down.
Twilight shrugged.
I don't think passing notes in person is going to work if that's her normal response. Where is it?
Pinky asked, looking around.
I mean, if you passed her your painting, shouldn't it still be here?
Frowning, Twilight lowered her eyes and scanned around her.
It's not here.
She glanced back up at Pinky, her frown lifting up into a full grin.
Pinky, do you know what this means? She took the painting.
Pinky laughed and smiled.
So?
She asked cheerfully. Twilight glared at Pinky.
That means that I did make contact with her,
she explained patiently.
She has my painting. As long as I don't stand around for very long, I should be able to pass messages to her. The fact that the painting is gone proves it. Unless one of the nurses picked it up instead,
Pinky pointed out.
What?
Asked Twilight flatly.
Well, if one of the nurses came by to collect Fluttershy and saw a piece of paper on the floor next to her, she might have thought it fell out of her pocket and taken it for her.
Pinky frowned.
Or maybe the nurse just picked it up and threw it away because she thought it was trash.
Although she could feel a headache coming on, Twilight couldn't deny Pinky's words. She let out a long sigh, some of her enthusiasm evaporating in the face of blatant logic.
Yeah, you're right. Odds are Fluttershy didn't notice or care about the painting some scary stranger tried to force on her.
Pinky stepped over and rubbed Twilight's shoulder.
Hey, don't be upset. I mean, we don't know what happened, do we? Maybe she really did take the painting. Plus, you can always just try again tomorrow.
Yeah, I know. Twilight sighed again, as the two mares made their way back to the chessboard, her hooves as heavy as lead.
Sometimes I just can't help but get all eager and fired up with the hope that something has gone right for once, even though I know it's never going to work out like that. It's hard to be optimistic when nothing goes my way. That's not totally true, said Pinkie Pie. After all, at least you have me on your side. That's got to count for something.
Twilight gazed over at Pinkie, the corner of her mouth lifting up slightly.
Yeah, you've got me there. You just need something to take your mind off of all that serious business,
Pinkie declared with certainty. Taking her seat on the opposite side of the board, she gave Twilight another smile.
So, for the rest of our free time, you're going to try and teach me chess again.
Twilight paused in the middle of setting up her pieces. She blinked.
Again?
Yep. Pinkie's head bounced up and down.
The last few times you got really frustrated and we ended up playing checkers instead. But this time I'm sure you'll be able to teach me. I can sense it.
Twilight held Pinkie's gaze for a few heartbeats, as if trying to judge how serious she was being.
Okay, so let's start with the basics.
Twilight began, plucking one of the short pieces from the board.
What is this called? A prawn,
Pinkie declared, her giggles unable to mask Twilight's loud groan. Okay, if you don't want to hear me ramble, then outtakes are at the very end at the 45-minute mark. Enjoy. Hi guys, you can probably hear in my voice the reason as to why this video hasn't come out sooner. I left this video after finishing the last couple of lines from the story, and by the time I thought that I left it for about a week, and then I caught a cold of some sorts, a bug, which basically hit my lungs and has practically burnt the entirety of my throat as well, which was fun. So that's the reason why some of you might be saying,
this upload rate is unacceptable!
Yeah, that was pre-recorded. Before going any further, I want to say a big thank you to, as always, a big thank you to Demon of Decay, all my subscribers, everyone who views this. Excuse me. Ow. Everyone who leaves a comment. The comments are important, and there was a guy I was watching yesterday whilst I was off work as well, and he talked about how it's nice when someone takes the time out just to say something good, because a lot of people will take the time out to say something bad. And when he talked about that, I immediately thought of you guys, and I just want you to know that I do seriously appreciate it, because it does mean a lot. As for when the next chapter of Asylum's coming out, I'm not sure yet. There's a couple of projects which I want to get done in the meantime, and I hope that you enjoy them. But if I don't manage to get them out straight away, I will start on Asylum whilst I'm waiting for these other ones to be done. Hopefully that's a fair deal. But of course I want my voice to come back, so yeah, I don't want to be looking back on these and going, oh god, listen to him, he sounds terrible. So yeah, who knows. So I'll see you all in the next video, guys. I hope you have a great day and enjoy Easter. I hope that this is a nice present for Saint Chocolate Bunny's Day. Anything else stupid I've got to say? Not that I can think of. Okay. So thank you all very much for watching. Stay shiny, guys. Outtakes, yeah. Pinky declared Pinky declared proudly. I'm never going to get this sentence done, am I?
But the only problem is the
Hospital? Really? Was I really about to say hospital? The orderlies led them to a large rectangular room with the same mesh-covered windows she was so familiar with. There were 2 rows of pillars running down the middle of the room, supporting a high ceiling painted in a blue and white facsimile of a clear summer's day. Yeah, that was spot on. Many of the toys were dented or scratched, while the boxes for the board games were held together with naught but tape. There were scars... God damn it, Skype.